So, going back to our cube motif, let's take the form of the cube, and instead of a face turner, let's do a corner turner, something that turns on the corner. And in walks the Dino Cube. The Dino Cube is a corner turning puzzle where instead of turning at the colored face, it turns at the corner that joins three sides. Kind of an interesting puzzle, interesting form here. Not too difficult to solve, not too unlike a Pyraminx, but that's what you get when you get a corner turning puzzle. Well, if we're going to do that, let's expand that a little bit more to the Rex Cube. What's the difference here? Well, with the Rex Cube, it also is a corner turning puzzle, much like this, but here we slice it a little bit deeper, and because of that we get these little eye-like slices here, and this can be shuttled around. Also, not unlike a Pyraminx as well, so I can move it back and end up with these portions moving almost independently here. Another interesting solve with this. So if we're going to have a corner turning cube of two different variations, why don't we have a corner turning dodecahedron? So we'll expand that to a dodecahedron version. We have a face turning one. We'll take this big guy over here, the Starminx. You can see it looks fairly similar to the Megaminx in that you have the star, but instead of turning on the face, it turns once again on the corners. So a corner turning dodecahedron. So I guess it would be like a dino dodecahedron. I think I've seen it called that as well. Again, not a particularly difficult solve, but something that certainly completes the series with this. Now, if you're going to have corner turning puzzles, like a dodecahedron version and a cube version, well, you may want to get hybrids as well, just for the sake of the challenge. So what if we were to take what we previously looked at, which is a Scoob, and combine that with this goes right down the middle, combine that with our corner turning puzzle, you end up with this guy over here, which is a Dino Scoob. It turns not only like a Scoob, such as this, making these motions, but it also turns with dino cuts like this, corner cuts. Now notice that the movement of this puzzle is very clunky. This is one of my Shapeways fails in which every time I try to move it, it bursts and falls apart. So because of the difficulty in which it is to move this thing and the frustration that that causes, this has gone unsolved and unreally tried. Simply because I can't seem to make it move without destroying it. Maybe I'll come back to it again sometime. But in any case, what's interesting about this is the similarities that this has in structure with the Master Scoob, which turns very differently. This does do Master Scoob type turns, I suppose, but in addition, see, it almost fell apart. But in addition, it also does Dino turns, and I'm afraid it's going to fall apart on me as I speak. Well, what if I were to take maybe a combination of a 2x2, 2x2, and a corner turning puzzle? Well, then I can get this guy over here, this little chop type puzzle, where it turns like a 2x2, but it also is able to make dino turns. And this was the puzzle that made it very clear to me why I would never buy puzzles that are based on magnets again. It is almost impossible to get good turns with this without destroying it with every turn. So no more magnet puzzles for me. But in any case, from face turner to corner turner, and we'll put these in their respective places as well. Now let's get back to our basic form of puzzle. So we've got the face turner, we've got the corner turner. Well, what else can we turn from? Well, instead of turning from the face and from the corner, how about the edge? So here we come up with our, and that would be this, the helicopter cube. I'll put these in a way that makes more sense. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, the helicopter cube. So instead of turning on the face or turning on the corner, it turns on the edges. So the edges actually turn in this case. Corner turning, edge turning, and of course, face turning. Now, when you start to turn on the edge like this, you get a very interesting property. Because here you can make 90-degree turns. Here you make turns that have to do with the angles of your corners. So you're going to make 30-degree turns. Here, it would seem like all you can make are 180-degree turns, right? But you can see as I started to turn this over here, You get a process of shape-shifting that you don't get with these. Built right into an edge turner is a type of shape-shifting where you turn from one edge and then you only need to turn so many degrees where you can start turning another edge. So you can see that we can go around and around in a variety of different interesting ways. But once you introduce this concept, and this is why I held off on the edge turners, is because you get this concept of jumbling. Now, jumbling is a special kind of shape-shifting where you make one turn in one direction and you can't undo it. In other words, if I make a turn here, then I make a turn here, I can now turn this back. I can undo what I did. Same thing here. Why not? Make a turn here, make a turn here, and now I can undo the original turn. I can turn it back. What jumbling is, if I can turn this back here, what jumbling is I can't do that. I'll make a turn here, and then I'll make a turn here, a perfectly legal turn, but now I can't turn it back because this is in the way. You may say, we'll just keep turning this around until it moves it out of the way, and you can do that. So you're going to find this process of jumbling where I'm trapped, which means that eventually, as part of my solve, I'm going to have to work out a way of dealing with the process of jumbling. Now notice I can't turn this here, so I'm stuck over here, and that is in essence what jumbling actually means, and that is a form of shape-shifting that enhances the challenge a little bit. Turn this here, turn this here, and turn this here. So this process of jumbling, to be honest with you, I was staying away from. I thought it was going to be too much of a new thing, too much of a thing that I really didn't want to get into at that point. But I did it, I tried it, and once you accept the notion of what's called orbits, it became somewhat fun. So I decided to branch out into the jumblers. So if I'm going to do an edge-turning helicopter, well, then I might as well go to the very artsy-looking Curvy Copter. Pretty much the same thing, very similar kind of solve, but I add these little shapes over here. I change the cut a little bit to where, once again, you can see it's an edge turner, but as I turn it, I have to deal with these guys over here, and once again, jumbling occurs. So it's easy to get this very screwed up, and that if you jumble it just right, you'll end up potentially getting it back into the cube form, but not able to solve it without undoing some of your jumbling maneuvers. Well, if I'm going to continue with the jumblers, if I'm going to have a curvy copter as well as a helicopter, I might as well expand into the dodecahedron version with this very, very handsome looking helicopter dodecahedron, where once again you go through the process of shape-shifting and jumbling. It's the same kind of thing, same kind of strategy. And where you can see we're jumbling over here a little bit, but it's just more of a marathon, and it's more things to deal with. And I found that I could do that too. So really, I'm extending the same strategies with each one, and so with increased vigor, I started to expand that collection even further. So I decided, since I no longer feared the jumblers, I would do more jumbling. Certain gems, such as these guys over here, Diane Gems 1, 2, and 3, which also, because they have edge turning capacities, you notice that we're turning on an edge here. If we define this as a face, we can turn it over here, and we can shapeshift and undergo that same process of jumbling. So basically taking that concept even further, Diane Gem 1, which brought me to the Diane Gem 2, right over here, which started to explore not just edge turning, but face turning. So I can turn on these faces over here with the 2 version. But in addition to that, I could also start turning on some of the edges over here. And by turning some of these edges, the process of jumbling was also happening here. So I can jumble across these edges as I shapeshift those, and I also got my face turning fix over here too. So I'm actually combining a variety of different ways of scrambling. Well, as we went from pure edge turning to face and edge turning, we finished it off with the Diane Gem 3, which is all face turning. And because of that, we've lost the aspect of true jumbling, but we can scramble on 2 faces, which is interesting. And we can put all these 3 together just because they are something of a set, they are something of a series. We kind of lose the jumbling here and maintain these as jumblers over here as well. So we will put these in the respective place also. But that explores the 3 different types of movements that you're going to get with your standard basic cube. Face, corner and edge turning. Now while I'm at the Diamond series, well, I couldn't resist but get this little gem of a puzzle, this Diane Gem. It's also a face turner, but it slices across the face a little bit here. So because of that, it makes for another interesting challenge, interesting scramble. It's a lot like this guy over here, only we've increased the amount of complexity, turning this into a edge turner, while this is really just a face turner. But it does kind of complete as much of the series as I cared to complete over here. Now I should mention that I kind of like this concept where you're not just turning a face, but you're dipping a little deep into the other face. So because of that, I wanted to get a puzzle where you combined the aspects of a dodecahedron, a face-turning dodecahedron, with a deeper cut, which means you're combining perhaps a Pyraminx with a Pyraminx. Put a Pyraminx together with a Pyraminx, put them together, and you get this guy, a crystal Pyraminx. Like this puzzle, which turns over here, it's a face turner, but it's a deeper cut face turner over here. Now what this really is this has all the turns of a Pyraminx, because what they are is you can look at these as corners, corner, 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 so this is all the turns of a Pyraminx, but you're adding these little wedges. These little wedges match these wedges as a Pyraminx, and it's moved very similarly. Now this one is a fun puzzle to solve. It's got its own unique challenge to it. So I found myself coming back to this one more and more, and it had the same appeal as this. So this takes its seat very close to the Pyraminx as kind of a variation on that theme. So just to keep inventory, I put my Scoobs over here along with octahedrons. I put my dinos over here along with the various shape mounts of that. And I squeezed my edge turners way over here. Wanted to put them closer to the cubes. Want to keep my dodecahedrons fairly close together. But anyway, here's my edge turners slash gems, including the Curvy Copters over there. And I put my crystal Pyraminx around where the dodecahedrons are, and somewhere close to the tetrahedrons also. As things started to grow, I decided I wanted to take the theme of cubes and add even more of a challenge to that. I'd already experienced shape-shifting, I'd experienced jumbling, managed to feel pretty comfortable with those, but what about bandaging? Bicube, this guy over here. Now the problem with this is you can see that much of my corners and edges are bandaged together, and all of my centers seem to be bandaged to one edge or another. And this actually caused a lot of confusion regarding how best to solve this, but was able to do that, so I extended it further to a bandage 3. So it very quickly locks up what you can do, but if you reduce this to this and solve it as such, then it could be fine. But the problem is that you could end up with parity with that. Well, as I was going through these cube twist type puzzles, I figured I'd expand that bandaging process even further to the infamous wall cube or burr cube. Now this was among the more difficult of the puzzles to get, to solve, but once you put it into a form that can be turned appropriately, then the solution became fairly straightforward, but this guy was among the more challenging puzzles that I had to try to figure out. So I figured I'd do one more bandaging before I would move on, which is the AI cube. The AI cube was interesting in that you had one color scheme over here, but you basically had to convert this into 4x4, where you had these on the top with the rest of these bandaged here, so that you can do some interesting scrambles with that, and then solve it as a 2x2. Move this back here and here. So once I got that down, there's far more bandaging puzzles, but I was okay to stop with that in terms of my collection. Because the thing about collecting is that you reach a point at which you may want to complete a series, but sometimes you just want to sample the series and decide you've pretty much had enough, and decide that you don't want to go on from there. And this was okay in terms of regarding the bandaging for me. So while we're in the mood for bandaging, while we're in the mood for taking pieces and gluing them onto other pieces, why not take entire cubes and glue them onto each other? So decided to get one of these Siamese 3x3s. which means that there are certain movements, just like with these bandage puzzles, that I simply couldn't do. So I had to find variations to do that. If I'm going to have a Siamese, then I'm also going to want a Triamese. Now the thing that's different about the Triamese is it's not just solving 3 individual cubes. This and this is solved much like this, but you had this middle cube, and this middle cube was difficult because all you had at your disposal was up moves and pretty much M moves, middle moves. So for the sake of that challenge, I decided to get that as well. But if I'm going to have a 3-layer, then I might as well have fused 2 layers. Double fused 2 layers over here in this interesting, not very well put together puzzle, but interesting nonetheless. Because it's solved off center, really each cube is considered one corner, so it's solved as such. But if I had the 3-layer, because it was relatively inexpensive, rather than 2 cubes, I would get the 3. If I'm going to get the 3, then in this particular case, I'll get the 4. What I decided to add to that was this guy over here, which is the 4-layer version. This one was particularly fun. This is Tony Fisher's Siamese 4-layer puzzles. Now, of course, there's Siamese 5 and even 6 that are out there, but not something that I particularly wanted to add to the collection. But this was good enough in terms of offshoots of the bandaging. The Siamese, the Triamese, and the Siamese 4x4, as well as these fused 2x2s over here. So put those in respective places here, I suppose. Here, here, and here, and bring these in as well. Now, there's another type of puzzle that I wanted to delve into a little bit that's kind of based upon bandaging and based upon gluing puzzles, gluing various different puzzles together, and that's something that's called Curvy Chaos. Curvy Chaos is where you take a bunch of puzzles together and glue them together to make interesting variations. So what is this? Is it a 2x3x4? Well, no, because you can see you've just taken 2 different puzzles and glued them onto each other. So this moves, and this doesn't move, but you end up getting very interesting shapes with that. So that was kind of fun. We have this. This is a 3x4x5 version of it, which is really also based on the Siamese concept, where you're really taking a bunch of different puzzles and gluing them onto each other and seeing what kind of interesting combinations you can make. It's like taking a Siamese and cutting off certain layers. So these are different Curvy Chaoses over here. Might as well throw this guy out here, which looks for all intents and purposes to be a 2x4x1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2x4x5, but it's the same kind of process. We're really dealing with a bunch of different cubes in Siamese fashion put together to see if you can kind of work your way through it. Not particularly difficult, but does skew your perspective. And this was the last one that I cared to get with that, the floppy version of it. Really, I think what we have here is a bunch of floppy 3x3s kind of put together so that you can make something of a challenge and scramble it and see if you can get your perspective with that. So, not something I use too often, but part of my fused/Siamese collection that was there in what they call a Curvy Chaos, as we're building things up more and more. It's like a little mini Dino Scoob. You can see there's a dino cut over here, and you can see there's a Scoob cut over here. This one is put together a little better, so I enjoy doing the solve, but the dino cuts only are out to here, but not here. So it's kind of a simpler version of that, so that can go along with my dinos, I suppose, down over here. Another bandage puzzle that I should mention is this Latch Cube. There's a couple others that are out there, but this one was a pretty entertaining one in that you can't really see the bandaging on the inside, but you get a hint as to where the bandaging is on the outside, where you can only turn it in the direction that the dominant arrows go. So I cannot turn it this way, but turn it this way. And this proposed a pretty good challenge regarding how to solve a simple 3x3, but with bandaging that was internal and could only go in certain directions, and I couldn't undo some of the turns that I did. Now, speaking of bizarre bandaging, which isn't really bandaging, I was kind of fascinated by these house cubes. Now, what's interesting about these is that you have these little wedges over here. Line this up so that I can make the moves properly here. So now I can move this over here. So it caused an interesting variation with this, but I was kind of fascinated with something that is solved in the shape of a house. House 1 and House 2. Just slightly different chimneys. This is part of a Diane series of planetary puzzles that have these variable triangular shapes, Bermuda cubes. I just got the Bermuda Mercury over here because really the other solves aren't too much different. All you have to do is make sure that you're setting it up almost like a fissured cube. So if you turn it just right, you can make your proper turn. Which does add an interesting element to the solution. House 2s, and in this particular case, the Mercury Bermuda Cube. Put that very close by to where the bandages are. And speaking of weird and strange shapes, wanted to get something beyond a dodecahedron, so got this Pyraminx. Now there's two Pyraminxes that are out there. This one is kind of more the standard version. There's another one that has a more skewed version. It wasn't really appealing to me, so I just wanted to get this one over here. This is another marathon type solve, but you can see there's different kinds of faces. Some you can turn, some if you turn one into the other, you can't make another completed turn. So this is more just a plug and chug kind of a puzzle. Turn this back over here. Now, because I really like the circle cubes, having the bandage circle versions, which was kind of fascinating, increased the challenge, why don't I combine the notion of having a circle motif and a bandaged motif where you kind of glue extensions on and make cross cubes? In other words, extensions on that add another layer with that. And hence, here's the 3x3 cross cube, where you can turn the top independently, you can move this into here, move this independent over here, and turn it back down. And this in turn increases and enhances the challenge with this as well. Now this particular puzzle I'm particularly fond of only because this was my first modification, which I modified after taking this, turning it into a cross cube, and then gluing on extensions from various 3x3s. So we have ourselves a 3x3 cross cube. Well, if we're going to have a 3x3 cross cube, then we're going to want to get a 2x2 cross cube. And that's where this one comes in. 2x2 cross cube, same kind of thing. You can move it as a 2x2, and then you can also move the extensions up here. Move that independently, and once again enhance the scramble and enhance the solve of that also. So, another worthy addition, 3x3, 2x2, and why not go further with that and actually do a Pyraminx version, and that's the Volcano Cube. This enhances the challenge also. This is mass produced, easily found, nice challenge, and you have the cross concept with this as well. This is Timor's puzzle, once again mass produced, taking the Pyraminx to new heights and new extremes. Well, I wanted to go maybe a little bit further with that. So if I have a 3x3 version of the cross cube and a 2x2 version of the 3x3 version of the pyramid, why not a tiny little 2x2 version, the mini Volcano Cube? Pretty easy solve, but I figured that this was worth it to add to the collection. So that pretty much gets all of it, right? Well, not quite. There's one other one. If I'm going to do a 3x3, if I'm going to do a 2x2, why not do or have square one cross cube? What's interesting about this is that you have to prime it, so to speak, in order to make it turn. So prime it just like you would, and then you can go ahead and do all your usual turns here, shape shifting it, so you have your cross cube solve and you actually get your square one fix as well. So handing this back a little bit, we have extensions glued on to circle cubes to make the cross cube. So bandaged puzzles and circle puzzles along with everything else. As things are rapidly expanding, where else can I possibly move to? Well, this leaves only one more area, one more territory to go to, which rivals my cuboid collection in terms of my fascination for them.